Habits are the invisible architecture of your life. They are the silent scripts that run beneath the surface, guiding your actions long before you realize it. And while people often think of habits as something you either build or break, there's a more effective approach. You don't just eliminate habits, you replace them. You substitute one loop for another. Every bad loop you run has a cue, a craving, a response, and a reward. And the fastest way to disarm a bad habit is not by leaving a void, but by filling that loop with something better. Imagine you're caught in a loop of stress spending. The cue is anxiety about money. The craving is relief from that stress. The response is opening your phone and buying something small, maybe food delivery, maybe clothes. The reward is the hit of dopamine and distraction that temporarily soothes the fear. But then the loop completes, and financial fear grows worse because the money is gone. Trying to simply resist this loop is like holding your breath. You can only do it for so long before your brain pulls you back. But substitution works differently. Instead of buying something, what if the response to that same cue was opening a notebook and writing one creative idea for making money? The craving for relief is still satisfied, but the reward now shifts from guilt to empowerment. Same loop, different outcome. The mental flip here is to realize that every bad habit is not evidence of weakness, it's evidence of an unmet need. And substitution is about meeting the need in a new way. If the cue is stress, the craving is release. If the cue is boredom, the craving is stimulation. If the cue is fear, the craving is safety. The bad loop gives you the illusion of that reward. The good loop gives you the real thing. And when you repeat the new loop consistently, your brain begins to rewire. The old pathway weakens, the new one strengthens. You become a different person, not because you resisted harder, but because you rerouted smarter. Financial fear is a perfect arena for practicing habit substitution. Scarcity identity often leads people to destructive loops. The cue is a bill or a thought about debt. The craving is security. The response is avoidance, ignoring statements, not opening emails, distracting with social media. The reward is temporary numbness, but the fear grows in the background. Substitution flips the loop. The cue is still the bill, the craving is still security. But the new response is taking one micro action, logging in and moving $10, or making one phone call, or writing down a plan. The reward shifts to relief through progress. Instead of reinforcing helplessness, you reinforce resourcefulness. The brilliance of substitution is that it doesn't require you to deny your craving. You honor it. You just give it a better outlet. For example, if your loop is late-night scrolling to escape stress, the craving isn't for the phone, it's for distraction. Substitution might be swapping the phone for a short guided breathing session, or a podcast episode, or writing down 3 wins from your day. The craving for distraction is met, but the reward is now deeper rest instead of grogginess. Over time, your brain starts to anticipate the new reward, and the substitution becomes automatic. One of the simplest ways to design substitutions is to map your most common bad loops. Take a notebook and write 4 columns: cue, craving, response, reward. Under each bad loop, brainstorm alternative responses that could deliver the same reward without the cost. If your cue is boredom and your craving is stimulation, instead of opening junk food, substitute with a 5-minute walk, a quick burst of exercise, or even drafting one TikTok idea for your business. If your cue is stress and your craving is calm, instead of alcohol, substitute with journaling or stretching. The deeper layer of substitution is identity. When you say, "I'm trying to quit procrastinating," you're still seeing yourself as a procrastinator resisting. But when you substitute with, "I am someone who takes action right away," and your new loop is one tiny step after the cue, your identity shifts. Every substituted habit is a vote for a new self. An identity compounds. Someone who consistently substitutes fear with resourcefulness becomes a resourceful person. Someone who substitutes avoidance with engagement becomes a leader. Think of substitution as mental aikido. Instead of fighting the energy of your craving, you redirect it. You don't resist fear. You turn its energy into focus. You don't resist boredom. You redirect it into creation. You don't resist scarcity thoughts. You flip them into questions that generate opportunity. "I can't afford this" becomes, "How could I afford this?" I'll never get out of debt becomes what one action today brings me closer. These substitutions are not affirmations detached from reality. They are loops that channel your energy into growth. Now let's walk through an example of a powerful substitution for financial identity. Say you often get the urge to check your bank account compulsively, hoping the numbers will change. The cue is anxiety. The craving is certainty. The response is refreshing the app. The reward is momentary reassurance, but it fades instantly. Instead, you substitute. The cue is still anxiety. The craving is still certainty. But now the response is reviewing your list of financial goals or brainstorming one idea for earning more income. The reward becomes forward motion instead of circular checking. Over time, the brain learns that certainty comes from creativity and planning, not compulsive monitoring. That is identity substitution in action. Another example. Suppose you tend to procrastinate on reaching out to potential clients because of fear of rejection. Cue, email reminder. Craving, safety. Response, avoidance. Reward, temporary calm. The substitution flips it. Cue, email reminder. Craving, safety. Response, sending one very short message with no expectation of reply. Reward, empowerment and progress. Over time, rejection becomes less threatening because the identity has shifted to I am someone who takes action no matter what. This is how substitution erodes fear and builds opportunity magnetism. Because each time you run the substituted loop, you're casting a vote for a stronger, calmer, more resourceful self. And that self becomes a magnet for opportunities because it radiates confidence. Scarcity-driven loops push opportunities away because they signal desperation, panic, and avoidance. Opportunity-driven loops pull them in because they signal calm, creativity, and openness. The practice of substitution can begin today. Identify one loop you want to change. Map its cue, craving, response, and reward. Then brainstorm one new response that delivers the same craving without the negative cost. Anchor it to your identity. I am the type of person who does this instead. Then repeat. Each repetition lays a new brick in the foundation of who you are becoming. Over weeks and months, you'll notice the old loops weakening and the new loops becoming second nature. And in time, you won't just be someone who resists bad habits. You'll be someone who naturally lives from better ones. Substitution is most powerful when it becomes automatic, when your brain begins to crave the new loop more than the old one. At first, the old loop will pull strongly, like a well-worn path through the woods. But every time you take the new path, you carve it deeper. The brain's neuroplasticity ensures that repeated choices physically rewire your circuits. Old loops don't vanish instantly, but they weaken. New loops don't feel natural at first, but they strengthen. And soon, what once felt difficult becomes second nature. Think of someone who bites their nails under stress. For years, the cue was tension, the craving was release, the response was biting, the reward was relief. Substitution might look like carrying a small stress ball or pen to fidget with. At first, it feels awkward, but over time, the new loop delivers the same craving. The old loop loses its grip. The same principle applies to financial fear. Instead of running a loop of panic and avoidance, you run a loop of calm and creation. The same energy, redirected. The deeper you lean into substitution, the more you'll see the hidden loops that shape your life. Worry before bed, that's a loop. Procrastination at work, loop. Anger when traffic slows you down, loop. Each one is a system of cue, craving, response, and reward. And each one can be re-scripted. You don't need to rip out the wiring, you simply redirect the current. One of the most effective substitutions for financial fear is curiosity. Fear says, this is the end. Curiosity says, what can I learn here? Fear says, I'll never figure this out. Curiosity says, what if I tried one differently? When fear rises, substitute with a curious question. Curiosity is disarming because it opens the loop instead of closing it. Fear locks down, curiosity expands. The reward is empowerment because you've shifted from helplessness to exploration. Another powerful substitution is gratitude. Scarcity identity looks at a bill and says, this is proof I don't have enough. Abundance identity looks at the same bill and says, this is proof I have access to electricity, to internet, to resources that serve me. The cue is the same. The craving is reassurance. The response shifts from complaint to gratitude. The reward becomes a sense of sufficiency, even before the numbers change. Gratitude doesn't erase responsibility, it reframes it. And that reframing changes the emotional energy you bring into problem solving. You can also substitute destructive self-talk with empowering self-talk. Scarcity identity says, "I can't handle this." Opportunity identity substitutes, "I've handled challenges before, I can handle this too." Scarcity says, "I'm not good with money." Opportunity identity substitutes, "I'm learning to get better with money." The craving here is for certainty. The old loop tries to find it by cementing failure. The new loop finds it by affirming growth. The reward is the same, certainty, but the path to it now builds you instead of breaking you. And substitution doesn't just work at the individual level, it works collectively. Families and organizations also run loops. A company might run a loop of fear when sales dip. Panic, cut corners, blame employees. The reward is momentary control, but the loop breeds long-term collapse. A substituted loop might be pause, analyze, innovate. The craving for security is still met, but now the reward is adaptability. Over time, the organization shifts identity from fragile to anti-fragile. The most magnetic identities are built on substitution. Think of people you admire for resilience. They feel fear like anyone else. They get bored, stressed, anxious, but their loops are different. Where others substitute fear with avoidance, they substitute it with creativity. Where others substitute boredom with distraction, they substitute it with practice. Where others substitute stress with self-sabotage, they substitute it with growth. The difference isn't that they're superhuman. The difference is that they've rewritten their loops. So here's the practice. Map one loop this week. Just one. Identify the cue, craving, response, and reward. Then design a substitution. Keep it simple. Repeat it daily. Track it. Each time you choose the new loop, you're not just changing behavior, you're reshaping identity. Because identity is nothing more than the sum of loops repeated. You are who you prove yourself to be through your habits. And with substitution, you can prove yourself into a new reality.